They told me to stand behind the fern. That big, dusty plant by the window, half dead and forgotten, just like me. Claire, you're tall. Would you mind standing in the back? But it wasn't about height. It never was. In our family, appearances were everything. You had to match, look the part, smile a certain way, wear certain brands, speak only of light things. I didn't. I wore simple clothes, flat shoes, and no makeup. I showed up as I was, quiet, practical, and yes, completely out of place in a room full of polished perfection. My sister Camille stood in the center, glowing in a designer lace dress, laughing effortlessly, surrounded by admiration. I stood behind a houseplant. My mother glanced at me once, then whispered something to Camille. They both smiled that tight, knowing smile. Not cruel, just dismissive. The kind that told me I'd never really belong, no matter how much space I took up. I've always been the quiet one, the sensible one, the one who didn't chase trends or post filtered selfies. While my family poured money into handbags and spa weekends, I tracked ETFs and quarterly earnings reports. They called me boring. Some said I was poor, others just plain weird. All I did was live differently, below my means, without pretending. And yet I showed up, even when I wasn't really wanted. Camille's wedding was the latest in a long line of family events I'd attended out of obligation. The ceremony was at the courthouse, followed by a lavish dinner paid entirely by my parents, just like everything else in her life. Camille had always been the favorite. Beautiful, charming, adored. And she knew it. While we waited outside for the judge, she walked over to me, casually adjusting her veil. "Claire," she said, tilting her head, "do me a favor and don't stand too close in the pictures, okay? I don't want to attract bad luck." She laughed like it was just a silly joke between sisters. But I wasn't laughing. I nodded, said nothing, and stepped back, just like I always had. Part of me wanted to leave, but a louder part of me, the one that had grown stronger over the years, told me to stay. I wasn't there to prove anything to them, but maybe to remind myself that I had every right to stand in that room, fern or not. Inside, I sat in the last row, alone. I listened to the clatter of heels and the soft rustle of silk. My parents barely acknowledged me. My mother hadn't said a word since I arrived. My father offered a brief nod, then went back to charming the in-laws. And then the judge walked in. He greeted a few people, exchanged small talk, then scanned the room, and stopped when he saw me. His expression changed instantly. He walked over, offering his hand. "You're Claire Bennett, right?" Every conversation around us faded. "Yes," I said, unsure of what was coming. His face lit up. "I've been hoping to meet you. You invested in my son's company last year, Juno Tech, correct? Your early backing gave them the runway they needed. They just landed their Series B last week. If it weren't for your faith in the team, they wouldn't be where they are now." He turned to my parents, smiling. "You must be very proud. She's a sharp investor." You could have heard a pin drop. Camille blinked. My mother tilted her head like she hadn't fully processed what he'd said. My father gave a confused half smile, trying to pretend this was old news. I just nodded. "Thank you. I'm happy to see they're doing well." Then I returned to my seat in the back, just as quietly as I had before. Only this time the silence felt different. I wasn't behind the fern because I didn't belong. I was there because I had chosen not to center myself in a family that never made space for me. Not until someone else did. After the ceremony, they all wanted pictures. The judge had barely stepped away before Camille was gathering people like props, friends, cousins, her new husband's extended family, even a few coworkers pretending to know her well. I stayed where I was, half watching, half waiting for the first wave to pass. I wasn't planning on being in the photos, not after the fern incident, and certainly not after the bad luck comment. But then my father looked over, gestured vaguely, and mouthed something like, "Come on." So I walked up slowly, unsure of where to stand. Camille glanced at me, then quickly repositioned everyone. "Let's do one with just immediate family first," she said, smiling for the camera. I stepped aside, again, just like I always had. A few moments later, her husband's brother, someone I barely knew, walked up to me. "That was impressive, what the judge said," he said. "I didn't know you were in finance." "I'm not really," I replied. "Just investments. Quiet ones." He nodded like that explained something, then got pulled back into the swarm of guests. I stayed at the edge of it all, watching from a distance, as my family carried on like I was still invisible. And yet, something had shifted. They weren't ignoring me out of habit anymore. Now it felt like they didn't quite know how to handle me, as if I'd disrupted the script, said a line that wasn't in their version of who I was supposed to be. The silent one. The poor one. The girl in flats. How do you erase someone after the judge thanks her in public? On the way out, my mother caught up to me. Not with a hug. Not even a real smile. Just a soft voice and a hand brushing invisible lint off my sleeve. You really invested in that company? She asked, eyes scanning my face like she couldn't tell if it was true. Yes. She nodded slowly. Well, that's nice. Maybe someday you'll think about helping your sister's husband. He's trying to start something too, you know. I didn't respond. There wasn't a polite way to say what I was thinking. That Camille's husband had already blown through 2 failed ventures and seemed more focused on networking than work. My mother leaned in slightly. You're very smart, Claire. You always were, I suppose. You just didn't show it the way Camille did. There it was. Even when complimenting me, it had to circle back to Camille, to her brightness, her showmanship, her rightful place as the one they'd all been proud of. I wasn't the daughter they paraded. I was the one they tolerated, the one they pitted. Growing up, I learned early that praise in our house came with conditions. Camille got applause for being charming. I got silence for being consistent. She brought home shopping bags. I brought home books. And when people visited, my mother would pull Camille aside to show off her new outfit, her new hair, her new plans. I was just there, present, polite, ignored. But I never resented Camille for being loved. I just resented the idea that there was only one way to be loved. I spent most of my 20s trying to outrun that feeling, working extra hours, taking online classes, teaching myself about markets, startups, capital structure, quiet things no one clapped for. I started small, $100 into an app that no one had heard of, then $500 into a biotech fund, $1,000 into a struggling tech firm. I didn't talk about it. I didn't wear it. I didn't use it to prove anything. I just grew, quietly, steadily, month after month, year after year. While my family saw me as the frugal one who skipped vacations, I was putting together a future they couldn't see. They thought I was missing out. They didn't know I was buying freedom. And now here we were, Camille in her white dress, my parents beaming beside her, and me with a phone full of numbers they couldn't begin to understand. The funny thing is, I never wanted them to understand. I just wanted them to see me. But maybe that was the same thing. That night, after the dinner and the toasts and the 100 photo I wasn't in, I went home alone. No one asked if I needed a ride. No one noticed I'd left early. But I wasn't sad. Not like I used to be. I got home, changed into sweatpants, and opened my laptop. My inbox had a message from a founder I'd backed a year ago. His company had just closed another round. He wanted to thank me again. Said I believed in something he wasn't even sure of yet. That kind of message doesn't go on a fridge or get framed in a hallway. But it stays with you. It reminded me I didn't need a proud parent to validate who I was becoming. I just needed to keep building. It started with a text. Hey sis, just checking in. Let's do lunch soon? Miss you. I stared at the screen for a while, not because the message surprised me, but because Camille hadn't texted me like that since maybe high school. Not even when I moved out. Not when I got promoted. Not when her grandmother died. Just silence, years of it, sprinkled with forced smiles at holidays. And now, hearts, lunch, miss you. A week later came another one, this time from my mom. Hi, sweetie. I saw this finance article and thought of you. Proud of all you've done. We should catch up soon. Maybe this weekend. No mention of the wedding. No comment about how quiet I was at dinner. Just a sudden flood of warmth that didn't match the temperature of the last 3 decades. That's the thing about being invisible for so long. You notice when people suddenly start making eye contact. I wasn't naive. I knew the judge's words had landed like a slap at that ceremony. And not just because of what he said, but because of who said it. Public, loud, undeniable. The man literally stopped the wedding to thank me, while my family stood blinking, caught off guard without a script. Now, they were scrambling to rewrite the story. I didn't answer the first text. Or the second. I didn't block them either. I just watched, observed, let the sudden sweetness hang there in the air, unanswered. It wasn't revenge. I wasn't angry. I just didn't want to play along. And then came the email. It was from a mid-sized conference organizer, Women in Capital, Investing, Impact, and Innovation. I'd been nominated, apparently, to be on a panel of early-stage investors who'd funded high-growth companies quietly, strategically. My name had come up from 2 separate founders. They wanted me to speak. At first, I almost said no. Public speaking wasn't my thing. I wasn't polished. I didn't look like the kind of woman who graced stages with slides and clickers and perfectly timed applause breaks. But then I remembered something Camille said once when I asked why she did pageants. Because sometimes, she told me, being seen is its own kind of power. So I said yes. The panel was in 3 weeks. I bought a navy blue dress, structured, simple, timeless. I got a haircut. Nothing drastic, just cleaner. Sharper. I prepped my notes, practiced in the mirror, even hired a friend to help with posture and tone. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to show up fully. No hiding behind ferns. No dimming to make anyone else more comfortable. 2 days before the event, Camille called me. Not a text. A full-on call. "Claire." "Hi," she sang, like we'd just spoken yesterday. "I heard through Mom you're doing some kind of investor thing. That's amazing. Listen, Mark's been thinking about scaling his e-commerce platform. You know, something more long-term, sustainable. I told him maybe you could take a look, just as a favor." There it was. No mention of lunch. No real interest in me. Just a soft pitch, wrapped in false sweetness. I kept my voice calm. "Tell him to send a proposal to my assistant. I'm fully booked this quarter." There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear her blink through the phone. "Oh, okay. Of course. That makes total sense. We'll do that." I almost felt bad. Almost. The day of the event, I arrived early. The venue was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, warm lighting. People greeted me with respect, called me Ms. Bennett, asked thoughtful questions. I sat on the panel beside 2 women I'd admired for years. We spoke about smart capital, patient growth, overlooked founders. I didn't shake. I didn't stumble. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking to fit the room. After the panel, people lined up to talk. Founders, students, journalists. I took photos, gave my card, answered questions. It was surreal in the best way. And then I saw them. Camille and Mark, standing at the edge of the crowd. She was dressed like always, impeccably tailored, smile set like a weapon. He looked nervous, adjusting his cufflinks as if they'd tighten into answers. I watched them hesitate, then finally walk over. "Hey, Claire," Camille said, voice syrupy. "Mind if we get a picture?" "Just us sisters. It's such a big moment for you." I looked at her, really looked. Not the dress, not the practice charm, but the desperation underneath it. I smiled politely. "Actually, I'd rather keep today focused on the work. Thanks for understanding." Mark stepped forward, hand half extended. "Look, we really admire what you're doing. Honestly, Camille's told me so much about your instincts. We'd love to show you our pitch deck. Just 15 minutes of your time, if possible." I didn't flinch. As I said before, send it to my assistant. She handles my pipeline. Then I turned back to the woman waiting in line behind them, a founder from Seattle. Bright eyes, good energy. We took a photo, without Camille in it. The pitch deck arrived 2 days later, not with an apology, not even with a proper subject line. Just a single email from Mark's personal account titled, "Here it is." No greeting, no signature. Just an attachment and a 1-line message. "Looking forward to your thoughts." It was almost funny how casual he made it seem, like I'd been waiting all week to read his business plan. As if I hadn't been clear. As if I owed him my attention because we'd shared a few awkward dinners and a family tree. Still, I forwarded it to my assistant, Leah, with a short note. Add to the review queue. No rush. Because there wasn't. I had no intention of prioritizing a company that treated me like a backup plan, especially one run by a man who laughed when Camille called me the frugal ant in front of a room full of people last Christmas. But I also wasn't in the business of petty revenge. I didn't need drama. I just needed clarity. So I read the deck, slowly, carefully, like I would any other, and waited. The company was called Hayes Market Solutions. Flashy name, shallow foundation. All branding, no backbone. Mark's idea wasn't awful. It just wasn't enough. A generic e-commerce concept with inflated projections, vague customer data, and heavy dose of buzzwords. He talked a lot about scale and vision, but nothing grounded it. No clear plan, no defensible niche, no real traction. Worse than that, it was desperate. The kind of deck that gets built after too many rejections when the shine starts to wear off and the panic sets in. I had seen it before. I knew what it meant. Still, I passed it to Leah for analysis. Told her to do what we always do. Run the financials, background check the leadership, map out risk. Standard process. A week later, she came back with a report. He's hemorrhaging cash, she said, sliding the folder across my desk. No outside funding in over a year. Vendor debts stacking up. Personal guarantees tied to some of the leases. If we walk away, he folds within 6 months. I nodded. And if we don't? She tilted her head. We'd have full leverage. We can buy the entire structure for pennies. Rebrand, restructure, rebuild from scratch if needed. But we'd need controlling interest. Anything less, and we're just plugging holes in a sinking ship. I sat back and let the weight of it settle. There was a time when that information would have made me feel powerful, vindicated, even smug. But sitting there in my own office, looking at numbers instead of faces, it felt quiet. Not empty, just quiet, like an answer that didn't need to be shouted. Camille had always lived in noise. Applause, compliments, comments, clicks. Everything she did came with a spotlight. I lived in shadows, in pages, in plans, in long stretches of work that no one ever clapped for. But here we were, my silence turning into strategy, her spotlight starting to burn. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted to make decisions based on what was real. And what was real was that this company needed a lifeline. And I had one, but only on my terms did I had Leah draft a response. Polite, professional, clear. We outlined the conditions. A buy-in at a valuation far below what Mark had proposed, with a controlling share for our firm and an option to replace leadership after 90 days. It was firm, but not cruel. Honest, not emotional. We sent it that Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, he'd accepted. No counteroffer. No edits. No questions. Just a shaky signature on a digital document. I imagine he didn't even read it twice. He just needed a win. Any win. Even if it meant giving up the company he'd bragged about for years. I didn't celebrate. I just moved on to my next meeting. That night, Camille called. Hey, she said softly. No cheerful tone this time. I saw Mark's email. He said you're helping. Helping. That's what she called it. I reviewed the opportunity, I said. We offered terms. He accepted. There was a pause. Then a sharp inhale. So, what does that mean? For us? Us. There it was again. I didn't answer right away. Just listened to her breathing on the other end of the line. Tight, nervous, unfamiliar. Not the Camille I grew up with. Not the confident girl who twirled in new dresses while I held the shopping bags. This was a woman starting to realize she'd stepped onto a stage where the lights didn't follow her. It means the company has a chance, I said carefully. But it'll look different. And you'll be what? In charge. My firm will hold the majority stake. I'll be overseeing the transition. Another pause. Longer this time. Right. She tried to swallow it with grace. But I could hear it. Her pride folding like paper in the rain. I should go, she said. Dinner's ready. Take care, I replied. I didn't say anything cruel. I didn't mention the fern. I didn't bring up the photo she refused to take or the way she used to introduce me to people as her quirky sister. None of that mattered anymore, because now, the next time someone asked her what her sister did, she'd have to tell them. And maybe for once, she'd get the story right. The envelope came on a Thursday. Thick paper, embossed lettering, a gold ribbon tucked neatly at the corner, as if that small detail could make everything inside seem warmer than it was. No return address, no handwritten note, just a formal invitation tucked inside heavy cream cardstock. Dinner in honor of Claire Bennett, hosted by Camille and Mark Hayes. I read it twice. At first, I thought it was a joke. Then I realized it wasn't meant to be funny. It was meant to look generous, like a gesture of unity, like family support, like love wrapped in a linen napkin and wine glasses. It felt off. It had been 3 weeks since Mark signed the contract. 2 weeks since Camille called, sounding like someone walking on glass. I hadn't heard from either of them since. No updates, no thanks, no follow-up. Just silence. Until now, I placed the card on the counter and stared at it for a long time. The dinner was set for Saturday. A small gathering, it said. Just close friends and family. It sounded harmless enough, but I knew better. I could already picture it, the carefully curated crowd, the background music, the performative smiles. Camille would toast to strong women and try to act like this new version of me didn't threaten her place in the room. I wasn't angry, just tired. I remembered all the birthdays they forgot, the Christmases where I gave thoughtful gifts and got nothing in return, the years they laughed at my thrift store shoes while I quietly built a portfolio they now pretended to admire. I remembered standing behind that fern, watching my family pose without me, and now they wanted me at the center of the table because I could save what they couldn't. I didn't need a dinner. I needed peace. So I didn't respond. On Friday, Camille texted. Just a single line. Hope you got the invite. Would mean a lot to have you there. I stared at it, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. I could have said something soft, something vague, something diplomatic. But the truth had lived in silence for too long. And I was done being silent. I typed. I appreciate the invitation, but I won't be attending. I prefer to keep things professional. Then I turned off my phone. That night, I made myself dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta, garlic, olive oil, a little lemon zest. I sat at the kitchen counter with a glass of wine and no noise. No expectations, no pretending, just me. Whole, steady, enough. I thought about how much time I'd spent trying to earn space in rooms I never truly fit into. How many times I'd accepted crumbs and called it connection. And how strange it was that the moment I stopped asking to be seen, people finally looked. But I didn't need their gaze anymore. The next day, while Camille's guests were sipping champagne and asking where I was in a different room, quiet, sunlit, full of notes and plans and contracts that actually mattered. I was reviewing the next stage of the company transition, approving hires, restructuring budgets. I wasn't avoiding them. I was choosing something better. Leah popped her head into the office around 2 p.m., got a call from Camille. She asked if you're okay. I nodded. I'm fine. Tell her I'm unavailable. Leah smiled knowingly and closed the door. There's a kind of power in boundaries. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. Just exists. A clear line that says, I'm here, but I'm not here for your performance. I'm not here to be fixed into your narrative. I'm here on my terms. That weekend came and went. No follow-up. No apology. No second invitation. Just silence again. But this time the silence felt earned. I didn't regret saying no. I didn't miss the clinking glasses or the shallow toasts. I had something steadier now. Something I built with my own 2 hands. No applause required. On Monday, I walked into the office early, coffee in hand, head clear. A message from the new operations manager was waiting in my inbox. Team transition progressing well. Employees grateful for stability. Excited about the new vision. I smiled. Sometimes the life you build quietly becomes the one people can't stop talking about. But by then, you've learned how to live without their approval. And that's what makes it real. The event was already buzzing when I arrived. It was one of those high-profile networking nights. Glass walls, soft lighting, a curated playlist humming beneath the low murmur of expensive conversations. Name tags printed in gold, pass trays of hors d'oeuvres that tasted like foam, and people saying we should connect when they meant, I hope you're useful to me. I'd been invited as a speaker, not a panelist this time. Just one name on a list of visionary investors being recognized for contributions to innovation and community development. I wasn't used to the word visionary. I still felt like the girl who once skipped dinner out to buy an extra stock share. But I'd stopped apologizing for being different. I knew what I'd built. Quiet didn't mean small. I took my place near the back of the room, sipping water, reviewing notes. People approached with small smiles and firm handshakes. No one asked if I belonged. That alone still felt new. When the program began, they introduced each honoree with a short video, clips of interviews, voiceovers from founders, shots of products being packed in warehouses or tech teams writing code. Mine was simple. A founder I'd backed early on said, "She didn't talk much, but she listened better than anyone. And when she believed in you, you started believing too." That one line almost broke me. Not because it was emotional, but because it was true. After the applause, after the photos on stage, after the awkward mingling resumed, I slipped toward a quiet corner near the gallery wall. I never liked the middle of the room. Too loud, too exposed. I was signing a program for a young founder, her hand slightly shaking, eyes full of hope when I heard my name. "Claire." I turned. Camille. She was dressed to perfection, as always, flawless hair, perfectly calculated smile, a velvet dress that moved like water under the lights. She wasn't alone. Mark was just behind her, stiff in a blazer he hadn't tailored properly. And someone else, a photographer holding a camera, already adjusting his lens. "We didn't know you'd be speaking tonight," Camille said. "That was such a great video. Really powerful." I nodded. "Thanks." "We'd love a photo," she continued, motioning to the photographer. "Just a quick one. Sisters, women in leadership, and all that." She laughed lightly, her hand already reaching for my arm. And I got it. I really did. The timing, the smile, the third-party camera, it was all a move. She wanted the image, the impression. Not me. I pulled back gently. "Not tonight," I said. Her smile faltered just for a second. Then came the performance recovery, tilt of the head, a soft, confused laugh. "Oh, come on. It'll just take a second. Everyone's watching." "Exactly," I said more quietly this time. "That's why." Camille blinked. Mark shifted behind her, glancing around like he hoped no one noticed. "I'm happy to connect professionally," I added, "but I'm not interested in photo ops. You know that." There was a beat of silence between us. Then she stepped back, smile still frozen in place, and nodded. "Of course. Totally understand." But she didn't. Not really. She didn't understand that for years. All I wanted was to be seen by them, without having to perform, without having to impress, without having to justify my place. And now that they finally saw me, I didn't need it anymore. They stepped aside. The photographer lowered his camera. I turned back to the young founder, still holding the signed program in her hands. "Sorry about that," I said. She smiled. "Was that your sister?" "Yes," I said. "She used to call me the quiet one." The founder hesitated. "And now?" I looked across the room, where Camille stood just outside the circle of attention, phone in hand, typing fast. Now she waits for my cue. It landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. The signed agreement. No red lines, no questions, no lawyer copied. Just Mark's signature at the bottom of the PDF, time-stamped at 1:43 a.m., the kind of hour when pride softens and desperation takes over. I pictured him hunched over the kitchen counter, Camille probably asleep upstairs, the glow of the screen reflecting in his glasses as he scrolled past the details he didn't want to face. He didn't ask about the voting rights. Didn't notice the clause that allowed my firm to remove him with cause, or without if the board voted unanimously. And since the board was made up of people I'd hired, well, unanimous wasn't exactly hard to come by. Leah was the first to see it. "He signed," she asked, walking into my office holding her coffee like it was court evidence. I nodded. Middle of the night. She raised her eyebrows. "Did he even read it?" "I doubt it." She dropped into the chair across from me and let out a long exhale. "You just became the majority owner of his company." "No," I said quietly. "I became the owner of my sister's illusion." The illusion that being adored was the same as being respected. That noise meant success. That style could substitute for structure, because that's what it really was. Camille had built her identity on surface. The designer bags, the Instagram perfect brunches, the curated life that said, "We're doing fine," even when everything underneath was crumbling. Mark was part of that image, entrepreneur, visionary, the kind of man who shook hands too hard and always had a pitch on standby. But the truth was uglier. The company was drowning in debt, employees were unpaid, and their last real investor had ghosted them months ago. What they needed wasn't a partner. They needed a lifeline. And I'd just thrown them one with hooks built in. By Wednesday, the paperwork was filed. My firm took control of operations. Leah looped in HR, legal, finance. We moved quickly, not out of cruelty, but necessity. We had to stop the bleeding before we could even talk about rebuilding. Mark didn't call. Camille didn't either. But their silence spoke louder than any thank you ever could. By Friday, I was sitting in a conference room with their department heads, most of whom looked relieved to see someone show up who actually had a plan. We outlined new goals, restructured the org chart, froze non-essential spending. I asked questions, listened, took notes. There was no speech, no ego, just work. That afternoon, Leah slid a printed copy of the signed agreement across my desk. "Thought you'd want to keep it," she said. I looked at it for a long time. Not with triumph, not with glee, just stillness. Because somewhere in between Camille's polished parties and my quiet spreadsheets, the story had flipped. And no one saw it coming, not even me. That night, my phone rang. "Camille." I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi," I said. There was a pause, then we got the update. "Mark said you sent someone to restructure the team." "I did." She exhaled slowly. "So is he still CEO?" "No," I said. "He'll stay on in a transition role for now. But that's temporary." Another pause. "You could have warned us," she said quietly. "I did," I said. "You just didn't listen." "More silence. I just thought you'd help. Like family." "I am helping. But I'm also protecting my investment. And that comes with decisions you might not like." Her voice wavered. "You're really taking this over?" I didn't say anything, because the answer was already signed in ink. Camille cleared her throat. "We're trying our best, you know. It's just been a lot." "I know," I said, and I meant it. But knowing didn't mean forgetting. I didn't forget the way they'd treated me like an accessory to the family instead of a member. I didn't forget the years of silence, the laughter at my expense, the casual cruelty they never called cruelty. I didn't forget the photo I wasn't in, or the fern I stood behind. But I also didn't need revenge. I had responsibility now. And oddly enough, that felt better. Before she hung up, Camille tried one more time. "Maybe we could meet for coffee next week? Just us." I paused. "I'll check my calendar." It started with the door. Just a small change. No press release. No all-hands announcement. Just a quiet replacement of the brass plaque outside the executive office. The old name, engraved in bold serif, was gone. In its place, Bennett Capital Private Equity Division. No title. No initials. Just the truth, etched simply like it had always belonged there. Most people didn't notice at first. They walked past it the same way they always did, on their phones in conversation, distracted. But eventually someone looked up. Then another. Then it became a whisper. Then a photo. Then a question nobody wanted to answer out loud. "Is Claire running this now?" The answer was yes. But I didn't need to say it. I showed it in decisions. In how fast invoices got paid. In how employees who hadn't felt seen in months suddenly had feedback sessions and follow-ups. In how chaos quieted when structure walked in. I wasn't there to rescue a brand. I was there to build one, even if I had to start from scratch. The first thing I did was move out of the top office. Mark had turned it into a shrine. Dark wood, oversized desk, 2 leather chairs that looked important but felt like stone. It screamed authority and insecurity at the same time. I relocated to a smaller glass room, 2 floors down, closer to the teams, closer to the work. I left the big office empty. Let the silence in there speak for itself. Leah noticed, of course. "You really don't want the corner view?" she asked one morning as we unpacked a new whiteboard. I want results, I said. The view doesn't help me think. She smiled. You know they're going to talk. They already do. And they did. Some whispered that I'd staged a takeover. Others said I got lucky, rode in on someone else's failure. One even said I must have blackmailed Mark because no way the quiet one pulled this off. I heard it all, and I let it pass like wind through glass, because the people who needed to see, really see, were already noticing. Vendors started responding faster. Partnerships that had stalled came back to the table. Employees who had once looked afraid to speak now leaned into meetings with questions and ideas. Not because I inspired them with charisma, but because they knew I'd listen and act. Quiet doesn't mean passive. It just means measured. Camille sent flowers to the office one afternoon. White orchids. Elegant. Expensive. No note. I left them in the lobby. A week later, she texted. Saw the photo of the new name. Proud of you. Let's celebrate soon. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I'd already celebrated. Alone. Quietly. That night when I locked the office door, turned off the lights, and sat at the small table I'd brought in. I made tea. No wine. No camera. Just a cup and silence, and the satisfaction of having stayed the course when no one was watching. Mark didn't return to the office after the transition week. He sent one final email, wishing you all the best. Hope the company finds its way forward. No signature. No punctuation. It read more like resignation than goodwill. I archived it. By the end of the month, we launched a new internal portal. Clearer communication. Real financial transparency. Anonymous feedback options. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. People noticed. People stayed. And slowly, people started thanking me. Not loudly. Not in speeches. But in quiet hallway conversations, in emails sent after hours, in a simple, I feel like we matter again. That's when I knew I was in the right place. Because I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to be effective. And now, I was. A few days before the quarterly board review, Leah came into my office with 2 cappuccinos and a grin. You made the list, she said. I raised an eyebrow. What list? Top 50 women in finance. Forbes. I blinked. Seriously? She nodded. Seriously? I laughed. Not because it wasn't meaningful, but because for so long I'd measured success in moments no one could see. Now, the world was finally catching up. You want me to schedule interviews? She asked. No, I said. Not yet. Because I didn't need another spotlight. I had something better now. A door with my name on it. And a company with a future again. The new photo was taken on a Sunday. We were hosting an open house at the company. Nothing formal, just a quiet event for partners, local leaders, and a few community groups we'd started supporting. It was warm out, early spring, the kind of day where the air feels like something's about to bloom. I had spent the morning walking through the building, shaking hands, answering questions, introducing people who should have already known each other. Everyone kept commenting on how different the energy felt. Like the walls had been washed. Like someone had opened the windows after years of stale air. Near the end of the day, someone from marketing pulled me aside. Let's take a quick photo, she said. Just you, the leadership team, and a few of the partners who helped make this possible. I hesitated just for a moment. Not because I didn't want the picture, but because I remembered the last one. The one I wasn't really in. The one where I stood behind a dying plant, smiled too tightly, and left without a single copy. The one where being invisible had felt like the safest option. This one would be different. I walked to the center of the atrium. The photographer directed people around me, adjusting the light, fixing jackets, asking for smiles. I stood in the middle. Not because I demanded it, but because they offered it. Because this time, there was no one trying to move me to the back. And then I saw them, Camille and Mark. They'd come in through the side entrance. She was overdressed, as always, heels clicking across the tile like punctuation. He followed a step behind, quieter than usual, eyes scanning the room for a safe place to stand. They didn't ask permission. They just stepped into the group. Not close to me, just enough to be seen. Just enough to be in the frame. The photographer raised the camera, and I stepped forward. Not far, just enough to shift the angle. Just enough to center the people who had actually built something with me. My team. My allies. The ones who showed up early, stayed late, and didn't need to prove their worth in captions. The shutter clicked, and that was it. Camille didn't say anything after. She lingered by the coffee stand, chatting with someone from HR, pretending she wasn't waiting for me to approach. I didn't. Later, Leah caught up with me in the hallway. You saw them, right? I nodded. She hesitated. You want us to crop the photo? I paused, then smiled. No, leave it as is. Because it was perfect. Not just in lighting or composition, but in truth. They were there, just not where they thought they'd be. Not at the center. Not in control. Not casting shadows over my space. They were blurry, off to the side, half smiling, half pretending. Exactly where they'd always tried to keep me. Only now I wasn't behind a fern. I was where I belonged. After the guests left, I stayed a little longer. Sat on the bench near the entrance. The same place where Mark used to pace on phone calls, where Camille once took selfies by the company logo, where I used to wait outside meetings I wasn't invited to. Now, the building was quiet again. Clean. I looked up at the wall where the new company mission statement had been installed. 7 words, etched in brushed steel. Build quietly. Led simply. Leave space for others. Not a slogan. A promise. The photo was published the next morning. It showed up on LinkedIn in newsletters on the company site. People shared it with captions like strong leadership, renewed vision, what grace looks like. The comments rolled in. Praise, support, questions, recognition. But none of that mattered as much as what didn't happen. No one cropped me out. No one pushed me back. No one called me the quiet one. Because now they all knew. I wasn't quiet because I had nothing to say. I was quiet because I was building something they weren't ready to see. Until now.